It always begins the same way. With the trees, with the silence, with the feeling that something ancient is breathing in the soil, waiting for you to step too deep. The wary western wilderness has its own heartbeat. I've walked through places where the trees lean in like a congregation, their roots knotting together in strange patterns, almost deliberate. They say the forest remembers every step, and millions. Yet, no matter how many times you walk those trails, there's always that moment where the air changes. The silence folds in. You tell yourself it's just your mind, just nerves. Maybe it's nothing, just the wind. But the forest doesn't care what you tell yourself. The forest knows when you're lying. Have you ever that sound? Knocks that echo through the timber like someone is signaling back at you. One knock, then two, then three. It's an old ranger story. We used to laugh about it around campfires. "Oh, that's Bigfoot," they'd say, or woodpeckers. But when you're alone, when there's no one else for miles, it doesn't feel like a joke. Every shadow watches. I remember one night, stepping out of the ranger cabin. The moon was low, cloud-like, drifting across the trees. The forest looked like an ocean of black needles. I swear the tree line shifted. Not moved, no. Shifted. Like the geometry of the land had rearranged itself when I wasn't looking. You see, this place has always had legends. Not the ones you read in the pamphlets, but the whispered ones. Stories passed from ranger to ranger. About trails that don't lead where they should. About cabins that appear and disappear with the fog. About voices calling you deeper into the timber until you can't remember which way was home. Don't follow the voice. Don't ever follow the voice. And yet, every single missing ranger report I've ever read, they all mention hearing their name. They silence is peaceful, but that's not true here. Here, silence is alive. It stretches out like an animal crouching in the dark waiting to pounce. You start counting your own breaths just to fill the emptiness. And then, when the sound finally comes back, it's worse, because it never comes back normal. The ray instants. They don't just break down here, they distort. One night I picked up chatter that wasn't from any channel we use. A voice, repeating my own words back to me, just a half-second delay. Like the forest had taped me and was mocking me. That wasn't possible. The cabin window rattled that night too. No footprints in the snow. No wind strong enough, just knocking. Slow, deliberate, human. "Who's there?" But nothing ever answered. That's the part they don't tell you in training. That's the part the manuals don't cover. It isn't just about watching for fires or guiding hikers. It's about surviving the things the forest itself doesn't want you to see. And you can try to rationalize it. We all do. Oh, it's just fatigue. Just wildlife. Just the isolation playing tricks. But then the tricks start lining up. Footprints where no one should be. Fires still warm in campsites that don't exist on any map. Old ranger journals mentioning the same things you just saw word for word. It's always been here, watching, waiting. I remember reading one of those journals in the dim glow of a lantern. The handwriting shaky, sentences trailing off mid-thought. The last entry said, "The trails are moving again. I can't find the way out. Something is knocking." Misled. The ink cut off, like the forest swallowed the words themselves. Sometimes when you walk the deeper trails, you'll see carvings in the bark, symbols you don't recognize, perfectly straight, burned into the grain like they were seared there with heat no human could carry into the woods. Every ranger tells themselves they won't touch them, that they won't look too long. But everyone does, and when you do, you hear it. Their name, over and over. Once the forest speaks your name, you're already marked. That's when the nights grow longer. That's when the cabin walls creak with footsteps that don't belong to you. That's when the trails curve back to the same clearing again and again until you realize there is no way out. Not real. Real. Not real. Not like this. And it always begins the same way, with the trees, with the silence, with the feeling that something ancient is breathing in the soil, waiting for you to step too deep. And once you do, it never lets you go. The gravel road didn't end so much as thin out and disappear, swallowed by ferns and the long, patient shadows of firs. I left the truck idling until the engine's purr felt like an intrusion, like breath in a church, and killed it. The silence that followed was not empty. It layered itself over me, the way cold lake water closes over a diver's head. My boots pressed a rhythm into the stones, a human beat against an older pulse beneath. There's paperwork for a shift like this, transfer orders, a ring of keys, a radio with a chipped faceplate, but nothing prepares you for the first look at an unstaffed station in the Deep District. The building stood with its shoulders hunched against the tree line, cabin logs darkened by rain after rain, its windows reflecting only forest. I told myself I would keep this simple. Check the main room, inventory, sweep for signs of trespass. A script keeps fear small. First day jitters, that's all. I fit the key into the lock and paused because something under my palm felt warm. Too warm for a door that hadn't seen sunlight all afternoon. Inside, the air carried that particular musk of ranger stations, damp wool, old paper, a hint of smoke that lived forever in timber. The floorboards accepted my weight with a complaint that traveled the room and took a second to die. The desk was where it should be, the wall nap pinned with colored tags, a bulletin board with outdated notices, campfire bands from summers long done, a missing hiker flyer curled at the corners. A logbook lay open on the desk, spine propped wide as if someone had just stood up for a moment. I put 2 fingers on the page to stop it twitching in the draft and read the last line. Trails feel off. The ink blotted heavy. No signature, no date. My name rode up the back of my throat and I swallowed it back down. You left in a hurry, didn't you? The radio sat onto shelf, red lamp dead. I lifted the microphone out of habit, thumbed the button, listened to the forest breathe through the static. District 12, this is station. Ghosts. Someone had aimed the lens at the east window, the one that faced a sliver of clearing. The glass in the picture reflected nothing. No desk, no map, no photographer. Just black. Cute, real cute. Distant wood knocks. The knocks came like punctuation, spaced enough that the mind could say coincidence, but close enough that the body said answer. I didn't move. The instinct lives in the spine. Do not greet what mimics. Do not reply to the forest when it speaks in numbers. Not real, real, not real, not like this. I forced myself to cross the room and push the east window open. Air kneaded the curtains. The clearing held its breath. Ferns showed their dull undersides, trembling as if in a storm I couldn't feel. Wind That's when the smell reached me. Wet ash. A campfire put out with haste, myth's cousin to guilt. I circled to the back porch, the boards bowing like tired men underfoot, and followed the scent down a narrow path where grass grew yellow and resigned. Wood Creek. There it was, a fire ring built of stones that didn't belong to each other, scraped from a dozen places and married overnight. The ash still held its shape, a gray bowl with veins of black where heat clung. Someone had been here hours ago, maybe less. No prints, no boot scallops, no sneaker treads, just the suggestion of weight in the earth, as if whoever sat here had decided not to leave impressions, as if the ground itself had agreed to forget. Who camps behind a ranger station? My name arrived on that twig's death, not shouted, not spoken, assembled. The breeze built it out of vowels and the yielding places between trees, carrying it from one trunk to the next. Here. I stood so fast the world vignetted at the edges. Shapes posed as paths and paths performed as shapes, and the cabin seemed to recline deeper into the woods as silence is peaceful. But that's not true here. Here silence is alive. It stretches out like an animal crouching in the dark waiting to pounce. You start counting your own breaths just to fill the emptiness. And then, when the sound finally comes back, it's worse, because it never comes back normal. The ray instants. They don't just break down here, they distort. One night I picked up chatter that wasn't from any channel we use. A voice, repeating my own words back to me, just a half-second delay. Like the forest had taped me and was mocking me. That wasn't possible. The cabin window rattled that night too. No footprints in the snow. No wind strong enough, just knocking. Slow, deliberate, human. Who's there? But nothing ever answered. That's the part they don't tell you in training. That's the part the manuals don't cover. It isn't just about watching for fires or guiding hikers. It's about surviving the things the forest itself doesn't want you to see. And you can try to rationalize it. We all do. Oh, it's just fatigue, just wildlife, just the isolation playing tricks. But then the tricks start lining up. Footprints where no one should be. Fires still warm in campsites that don't exist on any map. Old ranger journals mentioning the same things you just saw word for word. It's always been here, watching, waiting. I remember reading one of those journals in the dim glow of a lantern. The handwriting shaky, sentences trailing off mid-thought. The last entry said, "The trails are moving again. I can't find the way out. Something is knocking." Misled. The ink cut off, like the forest swallowed the words themselves. Sometimes when you walk the deeper trails, you'll see carvings in the bark, symbols you don't recognize, perfectly straight, burned into the grain like they were seared there with heat no human could carry into the woods. Every ranger tells themselves they won't touch them. The path wound north. Or it should have. The map on the cabin wall showed a clean loop, east to the ridge, north past the creek, west along a fire break. Yet after half an hour the compass needle wavered, and every turn brought me back to the same scatter of boulders, pale as old bones under moss. This trail should lead north, but now it circles back. I stopped to breathe, to let the earth settle. The ferns hissed like whispered arguments. The canopy dimmed even though clouds hadn't moved. Silence poured in again, thick enough to swallow the crunch of my boots. I waited for birdsong, for anything ordinary, and got only the high, thin ring of my own ears straining. I marked a tree with chalk. White X, bold enough to see on the way back. 10 minutes deeper, I found the same tree, same axe. My gut tightened. Either I had looped in a perfect circle, or something wanted me to believe I had. Don't follow the voice. Don't ever follow the voice. The forest spoke then, not with words but with arrangement. The undergrowth bent in one direction, the soil pressed as if by many feet. A suggestion of a trail where no trail should be. My skin prickled. The logical part of me whispered about elk, about migrating deer. The older part of me, the part that remembers campfire stories, whispered louder. I froze. That same rhythm again. The one from the cabin window. 1, 2, 3. I lifted the radio from my belt, thumb hovering over the button. "Station Cedar, this is—" I stopped, because the knocks had answered in time with my own words. Not before, not after. In time. I pushed forward. If you stop moving in this forest, it notices. Better to keep your feet alive, your breath loud. At least then the silence has something to chase. The trail, if it could be called that, spilled into a clearing I didn't recognize from any chart. A hollow ring of cedars stood like sentinels, and directly into the cedar ring. No, that's not north. The voice rose, not spoken but assembled again, woven out of the hush. It tried my name, tasting it syllable by syllable. My throat went tight. I backed away, eyes fixed on the prints. And when I turned, when I forced my legs to break the stair, the path behind me was gone. The undergrowth had surged, knitting itself into green walls, and I was left with one way forward, through the cedar ring. I took one step. A second step, and the silence pressed so thick I couldn't hear my own breath. Third step, and the radio at my belt clicked alive. My own voice stammered out, broken from an hour ago. This trail should lead north, but now it circles back. Stop playing this back to me. And then I realized, if this was only Section 2 of my patrol, what was waiting in Section 3? The clearing tightened around me, cedar trunks like ribs caging a heart that refused to beat. I told myself I'd push through, mark the compass reading, and circle back. But the forest had other plans. It always does. Halfway across the ring, the soil darkened, tamped into a hollow that whispered of fire. My pulse quickened. Smoke, thin, almost gone, but not gone enough. Someone had been here. Hours? Minutes? I knelt, glove brushing the ash. Warm. My stomach dropped. No campsite, no tent, no pack. Just a ring of stones hastily stacked and a memory of flame that didn't want to die. I looked for prints, anything to prove a human hand had done this, but the ground was scrubbed clean. Unnaturally clean. Not even a deer's tread. The forest had erased everything except the fire itself. Someone was just here. But where are they now? My head snapped up. Branches leaned like eaves, shadows folding into each other. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Not leading to the fire, leading away. Heavy boots pressed into damp earth, stride long, purposeful. But 20 paces out, the trail ended, just ended. No fading, no scattering. One step existed, the next step didn't. That's impossible. Sims circled the prints, widening my loop, certain I'd find the trail resume. But the ground refused to give me more. The last print sank deep, heel to toe, and then nothing. As if the walker had been plucked from the world mid-stride. The air tasted again, voice cracked. Station Cedar to District 12, possible trespass sign at North Sector requesting. The static surged, and beneath it, not my words, but laughter. My own voice laughing back at me. Maybe it's nothing, just the wind. I froze, locked. The toe of the last boot print angled toward me now, toward where I stood. I backed up 2 steps, chest aching with each breath. My boot sank into soil softer than it should be. When I lifted it, my print was gone, erased even as I made it. A chorus built in the trees, low and layered. Not wind, not voice. Something between. A choir humming a note too deep to hear, felt instead in the marrow. The cedar trunks shook without sound, their bark flaking like shedding skin. Not real. Real. Not real. Not like this. I spun, desperate to orient, desperate for the trail markers I'd chalked. And there, etched in bark above my own axe, new marks. Not chalk, not knife. Burned symbols. Circles within circles. Lines that turned in on themselves. They glowed faint as if embers lived beneath the wood. I staggered back, bile clawing my throat. My boots caught the edge of the fire ring and ash scattered, gray motes floating like insects. The smoke spiraled upward in thin still, waiting for me to step into them, to take the next stride where the last walker vanished. I couldn't move. My body understood something my mind refused. If I followed, I wouldn't come back. I closed my eyes. The cedar ring exhaled, and the ash beneath my boots pulsed warm as if the fire was not gone at all, only hiding its glow until I admitted its presence. I fled the cedar ring with the sensation that the soil would clutch my ankles if I lingered, that if I stepped into the last print, it would step into me. The forest didn't fight me leaving, it guided me. Trails straightened where they hadn't before, branches parted just enough, and soon the station lights flickered in the distance, a beacon that felt less like safety and more like bait. Inside, the cabin welcomed me with silence thick enough to smother thought. I latched the door and leaned against it, heart rattling. The fire pit's warmth still clung to my gloves, ghost heat refusing to fade. I needed answers, something, anything to tell me this wasn't madness. So I reached for the logbooks. There were dozens, spines cracked, some leather gone soft with decades. Each year had its assigned binder, but many were missing, gaps like teeth knocked from a smile. I pulled one at random, 1983, and opened it to a page where the ink bled through from the other side. My breath caught. Trails are moving again, heard knocking at east window. Ash circle near station, no prints. The words sat there, black and absolute, written by a hand 30 years gone. My knees nearly gave. I flipped further. Do not answer when the forest calls by name. It isn't them. It never was. At times, I turned to another journal, 1997. Different handwriting, same tremor in the script. Station feels wrong at night. Radio repeats back in my voice. Smelled smoke where there was no fire. The entries piled on. 2005, 2011, 2019, all different rangers, all writing the same story. The forest repeating itself through us. We were chapters, not authors. It's always been here, watching, waiting. The deeper I stranger the tangents. One ranger wrote of borrowed skin creatures, spirits that step into the shape of those they call. Another referenced indigenous legends, the watchers in cedar groves who knock 3 times to test if a soul is steady. Fail to answer correctly, and you vanish into the trees, walking forever. A story meant for campfires, yet written here in government-issued ink. The oldest logbook I could find had pages remained. Do not write your name. Ink carries it. Forest reads. My own pen lay across the desk, still wet with the word I'd written earlier. Heard my name. My chest constricted. No, that can't matter. The radio came alive again, unbidden, but this time it wasn't repeating me. It was reciting from the very page I held. My lips parted as I heard a dead ranger's words spoken in my own voice. Do not answer when the forest calls by name. It isn't them. It never was. I slammed the log shut, pulse hammering. Stop it! Stop it! But the sound didn't stop. It spread. Pages across the desk fluttered. Binders thuddered open by unseen hands. The journals whispered in chorus. Voices stacked one on top of another. Every ranger bleeding through until the room trembled with secrets I wasn't meant to read. I clawed one journal off the desk and flung it shut. Silence collapsed over me, crushing, absolute. And then, from the wall map came a sound that should not exist. My blood small against the windows. The cabin felt less like shelter and more like an exhibit, lit from inside for whatever watched outside to see me clearly. Leggings hum sluggishals aside, stacked unevenly, their pages fluttering in drafts I couldn't account for. The radio sat heavy on the shelf, its red eye dark. I told myself I wouldn't touch it again tonight. I lied. When the first knock came from the east window, I lunged for the microphone as if words could build a wall. Danuga, District 12, do you copy? My voice cracked. The static replied, swallowing me whole. Then came the distortion, words shaped like mine but bent wrong. Do you copy? Copy. Oppy. The knocks came again, this time on the north wall. Not glass. Wood. Hollow thuds that rattled dust from the rafters. Who's out there? No footsteps followed. No scuffle of boots on soil. Only silence returning like an echo that wasn't mine. Ming the cabin settled around me, bones stretching, beams groaning. I backed into the desk. My lantern flickered. Stay lit. Please stay lit. The radio coughed again, spitting out a laugh. Not mine, too deep, too slow. Funny, huh? The laugh repeated instantly, the same cadence as though mocking the hesitation in my throat. I gripped the logbook like it could anchor me, but the words blurred. I couldn't read anymore. My eyes drifted to the map instead, pinned with tags. One tag quivered, though no air moved. Then another. Then another. Until all of them trembled as though invisible fingers brushed their edges. I slammed the map flat with my palm. Stop it! The cabin fell still. My voice sounded too loud in the hush, bouncing back from corners that hadn't been corners a second ago. The silence pressed into me, smothering, demanding I fill it again. But I didn't dare. A low hum seeped through the window pane, resonating like a choir warming up. The sound tugged at my ribs, vibrating bone. My teeth hurt. My name whispered again, but stretched, long, elastic, like it was being pulled across wires. Nabi. Shock. I dropped to the floor, pressing. The microphone dangled above me, cord swaying, though I hadn't touched it. The red lamp blinked alive, a bloodshot eye in the dark. "District 12, I croaked. "Do you copy?" The radio answered with my voice, identical but wrong, syllables reversed and stitched. "Ipakui Ud, 12 District, 1212. My trembling breath. The knocks came all at once. East wall, north wall, the door frame. Windows rattled, panes trembling like lungs gasping. It wasn't hands knocking. It was the forest itself, pressing its weight into wood and glass, reminding me this cabin was never a fortress, just a borrowed shape of safety. "Please, just stop. Leave me alone." The lantern died. Darkness swallowed the room whole. And in that instant, the knocking ceased. My breath filled the silence, ragged, desperate. I thought I'd gone deaf until the typewriter on the far shelf clacked once. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even noticed it before. Another clack, then another. The carriage rattled, metal singing in the dark. My pulse sprinted. I crawled toward the sound, lantern forgotten, and the keys typed out words I couldn't see but already knew. Not real, real, not real, not like this. I frizzed, mouth dry, waiting for the next word. It came not from the typewriter but from the window. The final word was my name. The night patrol wasn't supposed to happen. Not after the knocks, not after the typewriter. But procedure is procedure, and fear feels smaller when you force your boots to move. That's what I told myself as I stepped out into the dark. Unreliable meant to be familiar, marked on maps, stamped into memory by decades of rangers before me. But they weren't familiar tonight. The trees loomed closer, leaning over the path like a jury. The stars vanished behind the canopy, replaced by a ceiling of black. Time dissolved. Minutes bent into hours. Or maybe hours into minutes. I checked my watch twice and the hands never moved. I checked again and they had leapt forward an hour. My chest clenched with a dread no animal could inspire. This wasn't the forest misbehaving. This was time itself refusing to play fair. I pressed deeper. Each step landed heavier than the last. My breath rasped in my own ears and I caught myself counting it aloud just to make sure it was real. 1, 2, 3. My voice sounded wrong, like it lagged behind the air. 3, 2, 1. I spun. No one there. Just cedar trunks aligned too neatly as if waiting for something. My radio hissed faintly on my belt, though I hadn't touched it. "Station Cedar," I whispered into the mic. "Patrolling Northern Loop, time irregular." The static swallowed my words whole, then spat them back. Same tone, same breath, just half a second too late. The path tistic. I should have been at the creek by now, hearing the waters rush. Instead, I found myself staring at the same white boulders I'd left behind earlier. Same moss, same gouges in stone. No! I walked straight. I know I did. The forest bent in silence, making its verdict clear. The trails weren't mine to walk anymore. They belonged to it. I stood there, compass spinning, watch refusing to tick, the air swollen with judgment. For the first time since I'd arrived, I realized I wasn't on The forest leaned forward, showing me its language. One symbol swirled until it blurred into another. My eyes watered. I blinked, and for a heartbeat the marks resembled faces, hundreds of them, watching from the bark. I remembered the scare rookies, about the old guardians of the cedar groves, how you never cut too deep, how you never left your mark on living wood. Those who did, it was said, would hear knocking for the rest of their nights, until they finally opened a door that wasn't a door at all. The journals had spoken of this, old rangers calling them invitations, stories about spirits that lived in cedar rings, creatures that needed only an opening, a carved line, to step closer. I had thought those stories were warnings wrapped in folklore. But here, surrounded, they felt like instructions carved by the forest itself. I tried to count the symbols. 1, 2, 5, 10. Then I lost the rhythm. The shapes bled together, looping over one another, so many that it felt endless. Every trunk bore marks. Even the saplings, too thin to hold such scars, wore tiny circles like brandings. The air grew heavy, saturated with resin. My boots stuck slightly to the soil, and the smell of char thickened until I could almost taste it. Not the sweetness of burned wood. This was acrid, bitter, like the air after lightning splits a tree. The hum deepened, crawling into my bones. It wasn't sound anymore. It was vibration, a low frequency that made my heart stumble. I pressed a palm to one of the symbols against my better judgment. The bark burned cold. For an instant I felt a heartbeat beneath the wood. Not mine, not human. I yanked my hand away. My palm was unmarked, but I swore the circle I touched had widened, opening like an eye. I turned in a slow circle, realizing that every mark around me was shifting, growing, watching. Something brushed my name across the inside of my skull, soft and... I dug faster, clawing through damp earth. More objects surfaced: metal, plastic, leather. A rusted radio, its speaker still fizzing faintly, though the battery panel was empty. A compass, needle locked dead south. A flashlight that flared weakly in my hand before going black again. Relics, tokens, offerings. The forest wasn't discarding these. It was keeping them, like trophies, like proof. My throat tightened. I whispered the ranger's name without meaning to, as if saying it might set him free. The air answered with my own name, stretched thin across the clearing, syllables unspooling like fabric. Nabi. I dropped the compass. The needle spun wildly, rattling against its casing, pointing everywhere at once. The flashlight flickered again on the ground. Its beam fell across the trees, and there, in the bark, was a carving. Not the old symbols, not circles or spirals. This was fresher, messier. A single word etched jaggedly by a desperate hand. Help. The sound swelled, low and layered, not quite human. I stumbled back, heel catching on something solid. Another boot, smaller. A hiker's? My breath came fast, ragged. My body screamed at me to run, but my mind locked onto the objects around me. There were too many. Radios, flashlights, watches. The ground glittered with them, half-buried bones of technology, each carrying someone's absence. No. This is everyone who never came back. The earth trembled. A hollow thud echoed beneath the soil like a heartbeat under the ground. Not mine, not human. I crouched low, hand against the dirt, and felt it pulse once, twice. A rhythm steady and alive. The radio at my belt sputtered. Static spilled out, shaping words I didn't want to hear. First day jitters. Maybe it's nothing, just the wind. My own lines, my own voice looped back at me. Then the laughter. My laughter, warped and broken. Replay. I pressed my back to the door, listening. The forest didn't knock this time. It whispered. Dozens of voices, soft as dust sliding off paper, seeping through the cracks in the walls. My name, laced among them, repeated until it lost shape. Nabi, Nabi, Nabi. Stemmed alive without my touch, its red lamp burned bright, bleeding across the desk. Static bled into words, not mine, not alive. Pages spoken aloud in a flat voice, too steady, too measured. Trails shifting again, time unaccounted for, voices at the window. The voice was mine, my breath, my tone. But the entry was from a journal written decades earlier. I lunged for the shelves, grabbing binders at random. The journals spilled across the desk, pages snapping open as if shoved by unseen hands. Each one carried the same script, the same desperate ink, different hands repeating identical warnings. Do not answer when the forest calls. Do not stay after dark. Do not write your name. The typewriter joined in, clacking violently. The ribbon stained each letter onto a yellowed page I hadn't loaded. Words appeared in crooked rows. Do not write your name. Do not write your name. I staggered back as the room droned my voice over itself, layered 100 times until the sound filled my chest like water. The journals whispered from the desk, pages curling. The typewriter hammered its warning until the platen rang like a bell tolling midnight. The map began to shift. Red trail tags quivered and then lifted slightly as if tugged by invisible hands. Lines rearranged themselves, paths coiling like snakes. The cedar ring, the fire pit, the clearing of artifacts. All of them shifted into new positions, circling one central point. The cabin. It wants me here. The radio fell silent. So did the typewriter. So did the journals. My ears rang in the sudden hush. Then came the knock. Not frantic, not loud, just patient. East window. The lantern's glow caught condensation on the pane, and the forest no longer whispered. It was writing me into its story. And I understood then why so many of the journals ended mid-sentence. Night pressed against the cabin walls like a tide trying to drown the light. The lantern sputtered weakly, its glow too small, too fragile. I set it on the desk, but the shadows didn't retreat. They gathered closer, thick, heavy, breathing in rhythm with me. The first knock came soft. East window. Then another on the north wall. Then the west. Not random, not frantic. Methodical. A circle closing around me. Uninscripted. I grabbed the radio like it was a lifeline. District 12 station Cedar, twisted, broken, like they'd been chewed through before reaching me. The onwards spilled behind me. I spun, lantern shaking. The keys struck by themselves, one after another, forming words I didn't want to see. Answer it. Answer it. Answer it. The platen chimed at the end of every line, crisp as a hammer blow. The knocks grew harder, rattling the panes. My name breathed against the glass, each syllable frosting letters into the condensation. Nabi. I backed into the corner, clutching the logbook to my chest. Its pages fluttered wildly, as if the words inside were alive, desperate to escape. Ink smeared across the paper, dragging my handwriting into sentences I hadn't written. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would stop. But silence never lasts here. It always yields to something worse. Then the choir began. Low voices rose outside the cabin, layered and endless, humming a tone too deep for ears. It rattled through the floorboards, shook through my teeth, vibrated in my skull until my vision blurred. The lantern hissed, dimmed, died. Darkness. Morning never came, or if it did, the forest decided not to share it with me. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, but the dark outside the cabin windows never softened, never gave way to dawn. My watch ticked, but the hands stayed fixed. I tapped the glass. Nothing. I tried the ritual again, 7 steps from the door to the desk. Touch the radio, touch the map, touch the doorframe. Each time I completed the cycle, something felt off. The boards beneath me groaned at the wrong weight, like someone heavier had walked with me. By the 3rd time through, I realized the sound of my boots had doubled. I froze mid-steps, faint but perfect, following each one of mine by half a beat. When I moved faster, it moved faster. When I stopped, it didn't. The radio lit, static pulsing like a heartbeat. I reached for it, but before my hand could touch the mic, the lamp flickered and my voice spilled out. "Stay lit. Please stay lit." Words I'd spoken the night before, now repeating in endless loops. The laugh followed next. My laugh. Stretched. Wrong. "Funny, huh?" I hurled the radio to the floor. It cracked but kept hissing. From the corner of my eye, I swore the logbook shifted. Pages fanned open, their lines filling with words in fresh ink, though my pen lay untouched. My name appeared again and again, threaded between sentences written in unfamiliar hands. I stumbled back, catching sight of the east window. Something pale flickered in the glass. Not a reflection, not light. A face pressed against the pane. Not fully formed, more like smoke clinging to shape. The mouth moved, lips dragging the fog into letters. "Come outside." My heart crashed against my ribs. I clenched the lantern, though it had long since died. I thought about running. I thought about staying. Both felt like surrender. The ceiling groaned. Dust fell from the rafters. Another set of footsteps moved across the roof. Slow, heavy. The door swung open on its own weight, hinges crying out into the dark. I gripped the frame, fighting the pull in my chest that begged me to step across the threshold. The air outside felt alive, thick, humming with 1,000 unseen throats. The trees had shifted again, their trunks bending inward as if forming a throat around the cabin. Each branch arched toward me, claws of bark and shadow. The fire ring behind the station glowed faint, ash pulsing like coals refusing to die. I whispered to myself, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. A ritual of numbers to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. But then the forest whispered back, counting along, mocking. 4, 3, 2, 1. Insulting backward, nearly falling, my boots sank into soil that shifted underfoot. It wasn't dirt anymore. It was layered with prints, dozens of them, boots, sneakers, bare feet, all circling the cabin, pressed into the ground so deep the impressions still held water from rains long past. The prints weren't random. They formed patterns, spirals winding inward toward the door where I stood. My breath caught when I saw the last step. It was fresh, the edges sharp, the toe angled toward me. It's still here. The radio hissed at my hip, sputtering my name in fragments. N-B, N-B. My own voice dragged out like a needle scratching vinyl. The typewriter clattered inside the cabin, though I hadn't left it loaded. I turned just enough to see through the door, the keys hammering furiously, typing words I couldn't read from this distance. Then the carriage slammed hard, ringing like a scream. I stepped back inside, trembling, lantern shaking in my grip. On the page, "You cannot leave. You are already written." The words crawled across the paper even as I watched, new lines forming without keys striking. My hand lifted on its own, pen sliding across the logbook. Ink spread beneath my fingers. I tried to stop, but my hand didn't belong to me. I staggered to the desk and slammed the logbook shut, but the ink still bled through the cover. My name seeped onto the wood beneath it, letter by letter, dark and wet. I wiped at it. My hand came away black. Already written. The typewriter rattled again, this time without keys moving. The entire frame shook, the platen rolling forward with invisible force, paper spooling out blank. Then words burned onto the empty sheets, scorched letters seared through the fibers. Follow the times of the words. Follow the trail. Do not resist. The map above the desk shivered. Red tags peeled away from their pins, hovering in the air like ash before settling into new positions. Trails curved, symbols drawn where no path should be. The cabin's mark vanished. In its place, a circle of cedar trees glowing faint red. I tore the map down, but the outline of the trails still lingered, burned into the wall behind it. My stomach clenched. The forest wasn't charted by us. We were charted by it. Hamilton turned toward the door, ready to bolt, but stopped dead when I saw the windows. Every pane reflected not the room but the clearing outside. The ash ring, the footprints, the faceless figure waiting at the tree line. Missing closer in every reflection, one window to the next, like frames of film flickering forward. I spun to the east glass, empty, to the west, empty. But when I looked again, my reflection was gone. The glass showed only the cabin, lantern light, the logbook. No me, slamming on glass. He taps, then silence. The journals on the desk flipped open all at once, pages slapping against each other. Hundreds of voices layered in my head, all mine, all wrong. Not real, real, not real, not like this. The words circled, echoing in loops until my vision blurred. The sound swelled outside, low voices rising into a dirge. The windows rattled with the vibration. Dust rained from the raft. A scrape echoed from the far corner as if something dragged claws lightly across the floorboards. I froze, straining to see, but the dark pressed thick and solid against my eyes. Then the sound shifted, not inside the cabin, under it. Boards flexed beneath me, a slow swell, as though something vast was breathing just below the floor. I stepped back, but the breath followed, traveling beneath me, circling, tracing my movements. Dust rained down, stirred by nothing I could see. My radio crackled against my hip, faint static leaking out, and then my voice whispering. Don't move. I tore the radio free, hurled it into the wall. It shattered, sparks spitting before silence swallowed it whole. But the whisper continued, now from the typewriter. The keys clacked slowly, one word at a time. Don't move. I bolted for the door, hand slamming the latch. It refused to budge. I shoved harder. The door shivered but held. Then came the first knock. East window. Patient. Deliberate. I spun toward it, but there was nothing outside, only trees bent too close, bark slick with condensation. Another knock followed from the west, then the north, then the south, a rhythm closing around me. The journals flew open, pages flipping as if a storm lived inside them. Ink bled and spread across the lines, filling every page with my name. I slammed them shut one by one, but when I lifted my hands they were stained black, my fingertips dripping with words. I staggered back, lantern still dead in my grip. The shadows began to move on their own, sliding across the walls like liquid, stretching tall until they reached the ceiling. One shadow broke away from the rest, stood upright, and turned toward me. It was my outline, my height, my shoulders. But hollow, the choir outside swelled, each voice dragging my name through the air, slow and mournful, like a hymn. The shadow stepped forward, its movements, shards of glass spilled across the floor, catching the dead lantern light in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I staggered back, arm raised, though there was nothing to block. Nothing came through the window, only the cold air of the forest and the hum that carried my name. The shadow lingered, stretched tall across the wall, mouth moving as mine did. Every breath I took, it took, every shiver, every word. I whispered, "Stop." The shadow whispered too, "Stop." Its lips didn't shape my syllables. They shaped the forest's. Stay. Shipments toward the desk, desperate for the Janel journals. Maybe one of them somewhere had written what to do now. Pages slapped open before I touched them, fluttering like wings. Ink bloomed, bleeding across margins, crawling to form sentences. Answer it. Invite it. Become it. The typewriter struck again, hammering my name, letter by letter, each keystroke sharp as a nail into wood. The choir outside swelled until the cabin shook, voices stacked in hundreds, maybe thousands overlapping. Each voice dragged my name differently, some in whispers, some in screams, some in flat, broken tones. The floor beneath me heaved, boards arched, nails squealing loose. Something was pushing up from below. I scrambled for the lantern, shook it until the wick flared weakly. Its glow painted the walls just long enough for me to see the outline of hands pressing upward through the planks. Too many hands. Thin, long, clawless. Human, but wrong. I froze, mirrored me. Its hand rose again, palm facing outward. This time mine didn't follow. I clenched my fist, trying to resist. The shadow's outline trembled, blurred at the edges. For a second it seemed weaker. For a second I thought I could fight. "I'm not yours." Then, the window behind me knocked. Regrets, even, patient. My breath rattled, my body betrayed me. I turned. The silence held me pinned. Not peace, not stillness. Silence, alive, breathing, heavy with anticipation. My body shook, but the cabin refused to shake with me. It stood calm, as if it had seen this all before. The logbook thudded shut, its cover quivering as though it contained something that wanted out. The typewriter rested with its carriage tilted, a blank page, waiting. I didn't dare to watch too long. When you look too long, the keys begin to move. They always do. The east window gaped, its shards spread across the floor. Beyond it, the trees leaned closer, branches knitting into a wall of black. I lifted the lantern, but its glow caught only fog. Fog where no fog had been before. It seeped low across the ground, coiling over my boots, carrying the odor of ash and rot. The fog whispered as it rose. My name, again and again, dragged across invisible tongues. Each repetition came from a different direction, left, right, behind me, inside me. Not a call toward something, a call out of myself. Nabi. My heel cracked glass, too loud, too final. The shadow mirrored me across the wall, stretched and deliberate, waiting for me to choose wrong so it could choose for me. Boards bowed, nails squealed, fingers pressed through the floor, dozens of them, pale and searching. They didn't grab. They learned, mapping my outline the way water learns a bank. My own voice stuttered backward through the speaker. Wankut guniagtan mai. A confession dragged out of my chest and turned inside out. Stop! I shouted, but the cabin swallowed the word, returning only breath. Outside the choir rose, the knock turning into song. 3 beats, then stillness. 3 beats, then stillness. The wilderness had a liturgy, and I was standing in its church. Fog swelled higher, slipping through the shattered frames, swallowing the journals, the map, the floor. Cold climbed past my knees. I did what rangers do when lost. I made my world small, counted breaths, counted heartbeats, repeated what used to guide me home. Not real, real, not real, not like this. The words felt thin, moth-eaten, but I kept saying them until they had weight again. I reached for the logbook with shaking hands. The cover stuck as if skin met skin. I tore it open. The last page was already full, my handwriting in fresh ink, sentences I had not written. If you're reading this, you're too late. If you answer, you won't come back. If you stay, it learns your shape. I flipped backward through decades. Every ranger's script, all of them telling me to do the opposite things. Don't write your name. Don't follow the voice. Don't stay after dark. Don't leave the door open. The forest had turned us into a chorus of contradictions until none of us could sing the same line. The fog licked the desk, curling into the spine of the book. Ink rose from the page, a dark breath, and reformed into a single line in the air. Stay. No, I whispered. No. The lantern sputtered once, as if it would argue, then steadied. I had light long enough to see the east window filled with faces, no features, only outlines, smoke clinging to shape. Each mouth moved without sound. Each mouth formed 3 letters. My name. I lowered the lantern very carefully, set it beside the typewriter, and reached for the field camera with the Polaroid back. I hadn't touched it since the first photo. My hands remembered the weight. The strap remembered my shoulder. The flight threw hard light against the window. For one heartbeat, the faces recoiled like fish scattering from a spear of sun. The photo skated out. I shook it, impulse and habit from a life that followed rules. The image took shape painfully slow. The window frame, the tree line, the smear of fog. Something else, too. Something at the exact center of the glass. Something that wasn't me. But it wasn't glass. I couldn't breathe. The choir dropped to a hush, a theater waiting for a line. The lantern's flame dimmed to a seed. Not real, I said. Real, not real, not like this. like this. I gathered the journals in a clumsy armful and backed toward the door. The latch had turned by itself before. Now it sat pointed at me, open like a mouth. The night outside was a throat of trees, a path that led everywhere and nowhere. I stood at the line between cabin and dark. The typewriter smacked out a final word. Choose. I understood then. The forest could do anything except take the next step for me. It could rearrange trails, steal my voice, write my name, but it couldn't walk my foot over the threshold. That was the bargain. Older than every ranger, older than the cedars themselves. You open the door. You answer the knock. You speak your name. You give permission. I set the journals on the desk one by one. 1983, 1997, 2005, 2011, 2019. I put mine on top and pressed my palm to the heap until the pages warmed. Listen, I said to no one and everything. I won't write it. I won't say it. I won't follow. The silence hummed, angry now. The choir growled a single low note that made my teeth hurt. The shadow shrank to the floor and stretched under the door like spilled oil. I lifted the Polaroid again and aimed at the threshold. White filled the frame and then bled into shape. The door, the seam beneath it, a smear of dark that had tried to slip inside. The instant the image locked, the smear pulled back as though burned. The floor hands withdrew with a hiss, leaving only grooves where the boards had bulged. I set the second photo beside the first. 2 anchors. 2 proofs. Not a new sound joined, the faintest clicking, like a needle finding a groove. The radio's light blinked red, then dark, red, then dark. A heartbeat I hated. The speaker hissed, and out of it, at last, came a voice that was not mine. Flat, too calm. Station Cedar, final check-in. It was the phrase we used when a ranger didn't answer. The forest had learned our words and folded them at the edges. Hamilton, I said, and tasted blood. Copy. Final check. Missiles sounded thin, but it was mine. The fog bunched at the threshold, displeased. The choir fractured. 3 knocks rattled the empty window frame, impatient, offended, almost petulant. I stepped forward anyway, slow as pen strokes, and closed the door. The leads turned. The sound was small and human and astonishing. I stood in the old cabin a long time, not trusting the new quiet. The lantern brightened. The typewriter sulked. The logbook waited like a mouth that had swallowed too many names. To a blank page, not the last, not the first, and wrote one line. I will not answer when it calls me by name. Ames bit the paper. The room changed pressure. Outside, the choir took a step back. I miss information. Not a great, not a confession, not a report. A different kind of entry. Every detail I could pin to this world. The weight of the axe, the smell of cedar and damp wool, the exact grain of the desk where heat had lifted the varnish. My handwriting grew steadier with each line, as if every fact was a nail hammered into the wood to keep the floor from breathing. The typewriter rattled once in protest. Then it gave up. The radio said name, almost, but stopped before the last vowel as if it had choked on it. I put down the pen, the cabin exhaled. From the far wall, a picture frame I hadn't noticed tilted slightly and fell. Glass shattered across the floorboards. I went to it against every sane. I put the photo on the desk and opened the logbook to the first page where my name had been written at the top during intake. I set the pen over it. I didn't cross it out. I didn't underline it. I wrote beside it, Ranger on duty. Then I scratched out the name's letters one by one until only the title remained. Paper. Tape at the door thinned, sulking into the dark. The choir withdrew through the trees, voices dissolving like snow in a river. The hum dwindled to a thread and then slipped onto the floor and farther down, farther, until I could not tell if the world was quiet or if I had finally gone deaf to it. I kept the lantern lit and counted to dawn. The watch hands refused to move, but the sky behind the trees lost a fraction of its black and bled toward gray. It wasn't much, but it was change. It was something the forest had not chosen. I needed proof I would remember. I needed bait for whoever would come after. I fed the Polaroids one at a time into the logbook between the final pages. The window face, the door smear. On each I wrote a single instruction. Do not answer. Immigration. I left the camera on the desk with a fresh pack of film. A gift. A weapon. A mirror. One last picture. The desk with the logbook closed. The lantern. The old photograph turned face up. The door latched. When the image finished breathing itself into being, I tucked it under the strap and slid the camera to the center of the desk, where a hand would find it before the radio, before the map, before the typewriter. I stood. The floor did not pulse. The door stayed shut. The window stayed empty. I should have slept. I didn't. I sat in a chair with my palms on my knees and watched the shape of the trees reconsider themselves in the earliest gray. Birds tried one note and then another and decided against singing. Somewhere beyond the ridge, something answered with 3 distant knocks. Timid now. Testing. I waited until the gray became a color like water left in a metal cup. Then I rose, put on my pack, and placed the logbook beneath my arm. The desk felt colder where it had been. I left the journals stacked for the next ranger and the Polaroids fanned like cards across the blotter. At the door, I paused, not to listen, to promise, out loud, to the empty cabin. I'll come back tonight, I said, and understood that was the terror speaking. The forest wants a schedule. It wants ritual. It wants you predictable. I'll come back when I choose, I corrected. And the word choose stung like a splinter pulled. I stepped into a morning the forest couldn't stop. Not sunlight, just less dark. The air smelled like rain and iron and something old that had gone 2 steps deeper underground. The trail to the ridge lay where the map said it would not. The cedar ring kept a respectful distance, pretending it had always been only trees. The fire pit was a circle of cold stones. The footprints pointed toward the creek. I did not follow them. I walked my 7 steps into the world and didn't count the next 7. I made the path as I went. The forest's silence paced me, close as breath. But it did not speak my name. At the edge of the trees I stopped and turned back once. The station waited, small, stubborn, wrong in all the ways that meant it still belonged to us a little. Inside, a camera, a book, a latch that turns, a chair worn smooth by understanding. The choir did not sing. The radio did not call. The typewriter held its tongue. I said was the only words that mattered, to the cabin, to the cedars, to the thing listening underneath the roots. Not today. The forest breathed, I breathed back, and I kept walking.